No one could have predicted that a simple morning walk would turn into a nightmare for an elderly black woman. Ms. Evelyn Walker, who had spent years finding solace in her favorite park, would soon be confronted by two aggressive police officers who assumed she didn't belong there. But what they didn't realize was that her son, a federal agent, was just around the corner, and the truth that unfolded would leave everyone speechless. Before we get started, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, be sure to subscribe for more. On a bright and sunny morning, Ms. Walker set out for her daily routine, her heart filled with a sense of calm and joy. In her mid-70s, she had turned her morning walks into a cherished ritual, one that connected her with the memories of her late husband, Henry. Every step she took along the park's winding paths reminded her of their long walks together, sharing stories and laughter. As she made her way to the familiar bench by the pond, she took in the beauty of the surroundings, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, children playing in the distance, and the sound of birds chirping overhead. For Ms. Walker, this park was not just a place. It was a sanctuary, a reminder of the love and happiness she once shared with her husband. Wearing her favorite floral scarf, a sentimental gift from Henry, Ms. Walker arrived at her bench, a small smile playing on her lips. She settled in, her cane resting beside her as she took a moment to enjoy the tranquility. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the sun wash over her, and listened to the soft lapping of the water against the shore. Unbeknownst to her, across the park, a woman named Linda Jackson was on her morning power walk. In her 50s, Linda was known in the community for her self-appointed role as a neighborhood watchdog. She was always on alert, ready to report anything or anyone that seemed out of place. As she approached the pond, her sharp eyes caught sight of Ms. Walker sitting alone. A frown creased her brow. Linda had never seen this elderly woman before, and for reasons she couldn't quite articulate, she felt uneasy. Why was Ms. Walker sitting there? What was she doing alone? The whispers of suspicion filled Linda's mind as she began to draw conclusions based solely on the color of Ms. Walker's skin and the fact that she looked different from the usual parkgoers. Without a second thought, Linda pulled out her phone and dialed 911, convinced that she was doing the right thing. "Hello, yes, I'm at the park," she said, her voice taut with urgency. "There's this suspicious older woman sitting by herself on a bench. She doesn't belong here." As the operator assured her that help was on the way, Linda felt a sense of satisfaction, believing she was protecting the park. Little did she know her call would set into motion a series of events that would upend not only Ms. Walker's life, but also her own understanding of justice and humanity. While Ms. Walker remained blissfully unaware of the brewing storm, she continued to enjoy the simple pleasure of the pond. Her day was about to take a shocking turn, one that would lead to an unexpected confrontation and a lesson in empathy that would resonate throughout the community. As Ms. Walker sat peacefully by the pond, lost in her thoughts, a police patrol car pulled up to the park entrance. Inside, Officers Davis and Reed received a dispatch alert about a suspicious person reported by a concerned citizen. Officer Davis, a tall man with a stern demeanor, glanced at his partner, Officer Reed, who was still somewhat new to the force but eager to prove herself. "Let's check it out," Davis said, his tone brusque. "Probably just another misunderstanding." As they approached the area near the pond, they spotted Ms. Walker sitting on the bench, a serene figure against the backdrop of the park. Officer Davis pointed her out, and the two officers stepped out of their patrol car, making their way toward her. The sun shone brightly, illuminating the vibrant colors of the park, but the officers were focused solely on their mission. "Ma'am, what are you doing here?" Officer Davis asked abruptly, his voice sharp and accusatory as they reached Ms. Walker. Startled, Ms. Walker opened her eyes and looked up at the two officers, her heart beginning to race. "I'm just resting," she replied, trying to maintain her composure. "I come here every morning." The officers exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable. "Do you live around here?" Davis pressed, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized her. "Yes, I live a few blocks away," Ms. Walker replied, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "Is something wrong?" "We received a call about a suspicious person hanging around," Officer Davis said, his tone cold. "Someone said you were just sitting here for too long." The shock of his words washed over Ms. Walker. "I'm not causing any trouble," she said, confusion mingling with frustration. "I've been coming to this park for years. I just like to sit by the pond." Davis leaned in closer, his demeanor unfriendly. "Do you have any identification on you?" he asked, his voice sharp and demanding. Ms. Walker felt a knot form in her stomach. She reached into her bag, trembling slightly as she pulled out her wallet and handed over her ID. Officer Davis snatched it from her, examining it as if it might hold some hidden secret. Meanwhile, Officer Reed stood nearby, arms crossed, her gaze fixed on Ms. Walker, as though waiting for her to make a wrong move. Ms. Walker's heart raced, and she struggled to understand why she was being treated this way. "I've done nothing wrong," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I'm just sitting here, minding my own business." The officers didn't seem to care about her explanation. Officer Davis handed back her ID with a dismissive sigh. "Well, people are feeling uncomfortable," he said, not looking her in the eye. "Maybe it's time you left for today." Ms. Walker's heart sank at his words. She had come to the park seeking peace, a simple moment of tranquility, and now she felt threatened in a place she had always considered safe. "I didn't mean to make anyone uncomfortable," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. "I've been coming here for years. I'm not causing any trouble." The situation was escalating, and she could sense the tension in the air. All around her, the once inviting park now felt hostile, as if the walls were closing in. She glanced at the other park-goers nearby, but no one seemed willing to intervene, and that frightened her even more. "Ma'am," Officer Davis warned, "we're asking you to leave. It's best for everyone if you just move along." Ms. Walker felt a lump in her throat as tears threatened to spill from her eyes. She wanted to stand her ground, to tell the officers that they had no right to treat her this way, but the fear gripped her. She was just an old woman, and they were two young officers in uniform. What would happen if she refused to comply? Would they arrest her? Would they use force? Just as she began to gather herself, ready to leave before things escalated further, a familiar voice called out from across the park. "Mom!" The moment Ms. Walker heard her son's voice, a wave of relief washed over her. Darnell Walker, her son, was not just any man. He was a federal agent, someone who had dedicated his life to fighting for justice and standing up against the very prejudices that now threatened her peace. As he rushed toward her, the stern expressions of the two officers began to shift, confusion evident on their faces. "Mom!" Darnell called again, urgency in his tone as he reached her side. He was tall and commanding, a figure that radiated confidence and authority. Darnell had always been protective of his mother, and witnessing her in distress ignited a fierce protective instinct within him. Ms. Walker looked up at her son, her heart swelling with gratitude and love. "Darnell, she began, but her words caught in her throat as she tried to explain the situation. The fear from moments before lingered in her chest, but the sight of her son made her feel a little safer. Darnell took a moment to assess the scene. His gaze swept over the two officers, who stood awkwardly, clearly unprepared for his arrival. Officer Davis, still clutching Ms. Walker's ID, looked uncomfortable, while Officer Reed shifted her weight, glancing nervously at her partner. "Is there a problem here?" Darnell asked, his voice steady but carrying an edge that commanded respect. He was used to taking charge in tense situations, but this was different. This was personal. "Sir, this is a police matter," Officer Davis said, his tone sharp, though there was a hint of uncertainty now. "We're handling it." Darnell took a step closer, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the officers. "Handling what? My mother sitting peacefully on a bench? You're treating her like she's some kind of criminal." The tension in the air thickened. The onlookers who had gathered began to whisper amongst themselves, intrigued by the unfolding drama. Darnell's presence commanded attention, and the crowd sensed that something significant was about to happen. "Sir, we received a call about a suspicious person," Officer Reed replied, her voice lacking the earlier confidence. "We were just following up on it." Darnell's expression hardened. "And what exactly made you think my mother was suspicious? Because she's an elderly black woman sitting alone in the park? Is that really your rationale?" The officers exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that their assumptions were being challenged in front of witnesses. Darnell's tone became even more assertive. "You've harassed an innocent woman based solely on your biases. Do you understand how wrong that is?" Ms. Walker felt a rush of pride as she watched her son confront the officers. Darnell had always been her protector, and in this moment, she was reminded of how deeply he cared for her well-being. The tension in her chest began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of solidarity. "We were just trying to ensure everyone's safety," Officer Davis said, his voice wavering slightly. "It's our job." Darnell stepped closer, making it clear he would not back down. "Your job is to protect and serve, not to profile and intimidate. You had no reason to approach her like this. You didn't ask her if she needed help. You assumed she was trouble." The onlookers remained silent, their eyes glued to the scene, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and curiosity. They had all witnessed the initial confrontation, and now they were witnessing a powerful moment of accountability. Just then, Officer Reed spoke up, her voice trembling. "We didn't know who she was. We were just following procedure." "Following procedure?" Darnell scoffed, shaking his head. You need to rethink your procedures if they lead you to treat innocent people like this. Ms. Walker watched as Darnell's words resonated in the crowd. There was a collective sense of understanding and recognition among those who had gathered. They too had likely experienced the sting of prejudice, the feeling of being judged unfairly based on their appearance. "I'm sorry," Officer Reed said softly, her eyes downcast, realizing the gravity of the situation. "We didn't mean to make her feel unsafe." "Sorry isn't enough," Darnell replied firmly. "You need to understand the impact of your actions. My mother deserves to feel safe in her community, and so does everyone else." At that moment, Ms. Walker's heart swelled with pride for her son. He was not just defending her. He was standing up for everyone who had been treated unfairly. This wasn't just about her. It was about justice, equity, and the fight against systemic racism. As the tension began to dissipate, Darnell turned to his mother, seeking her reassurance. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked gently, his tone softening as he checked on her. "I am now, thanks to you," she replied, her voice steadier. "But it's still hard to believe this is happening." Darnell nodded, his heart heavy. He knew this wasn't just a singular moment. It was a reflection of a larger issue that needed to be addressed. "We'll make sure they understand. I won't let this go," he promised. Darnell's determination surged as he stood beside his mother, facing the two officers. The crowd, which had initially gathered in curiosity, now buzzed with murmurs of discontent and support for Ms. Walker. Their collective energy filled the air, creating a palpable tension that both officers could feel. It was as if the weight of their actions had suddenly become too heavy to bear. Officer Davis shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware that he and his partner were under scrutiny. "Look, we're just doing our job," he reiterated, but the strength of his words had diminished, revealing a hint of doubt. "Doing your job shouldn't involve harassing innocent people." Darnell shot back, his voice firm. "You're supposed to protect the community, not intimidate its members. You're supposed to be a source of safety, not fear." Ms. Walker remained quiet but resolute, her heart pounding in her chest as she felt the overwhelming support from those around her. The onlookers were no longer just passive observers. They were witnesses to injustice, and that realization sparked a fire within them. "Why don't we just leave her alone?" a voice called from the crowd. A young man stepped forward, his face flushed with indignation. "She's not doing anything wrong. Why don't you focus on real issues instead of bothering an elderly woman enjoying her day?" The crowd murmured in agreement, and Darnell felt a surge of hope. He could see the tides beginning to shift. The community was standing up, refusing to let injustice go unchallenged. It was a beautiful moment, one that encapsulated the power of solidarity. Officer Reed, sensing the growing animosity, took a step back, her demeanor shifting. "We just want to ensure everyone is safe," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "We didn't know." "Exactly," Darnell interrupted, his tone sharp. "You didn't know because you didn't bother to ask. You saw my mother sitting here, and instead of engaging with her, you assumed she was a threat. That's the problem." Ms. Walker watched her son's passionate defense, pride swelling in her heart. She had raised him to be compassionate and just, and in this moment, he was embodying those values perfectly. Darnell had always been her rock, but now he was also a voice for countless others who had faced similar injustices. The atmosphere was electric, filled with an undeniable energy that rippled through the crowd. People began to step forward, sharing their own experiences of being judged or mistreated based on their appearance. Their voices rose in a chorus of solidarity, creating a powerful narrative of resilience and strength. "I was stopped in my own neighborhood just last week for walking my dog," an older woman exclaimed. "Just because I looked suspicious to them. I was accused of stealing from a store simply because I looked different," another man added, his voice filled with anger. "It's unacceptable." Darnell looked around at the faces in the crowd, their expressions a mixture of determination and hope. This was more than just his mother's story. It was a collective cry for justice. People were coming together to demand change, to challenge the systems that had perpetuated inequality for far too long. Darnell turned back to the officers, who now looked visibly shaken. "You have a choice here," he said, his voice steady. "You can either choose to listen and learn from this moment, or continue to perpetuate the same old narratives that harm our community. The choice is yours, ma'am." See. The tension in the air was thick as the officers exchanged uncertain glances. They were no longer in control of the situation. The community had taken the reins, and it was clear that they were not going to back down. We didn't mean any harm," Officer Reed finally said, her voice quieter now, almost defeated. We were just following protocol." "Your protocol is flawed," Darnell replied firmly. And if it leads to situations like this, it needs to be reevaluated. People's lives are not just protocols to be checked off. Ms. Walker felt a surge of strength as she listened to her son. She had experienced fear and humiliation that morning, but now she felt empowered by the support around her. The community was united, and together they were stronger. "Let's make sure this moment counts," Darnell said, looking out at the crowd. "We need to hold each other accountable, and that starts with conversations like this. It starts with standing up for what's right." As the crowd erupted into applause, Ms. Walker felt a renewed sense of hope. She had always believed in the goodness of people, and now she could see that belief reflected in the faces of those around her. This was a moment of awakening, one that could pave the way for change. The energy in the park was electric as the crowd rallied around Darnell and Ms. Walker. Applause erupted from the onlookers, their faces shining with solidarity and determination. In that moment, the park transformed from a place of solitude to a hub of empowerment. People from all walks of life stood together, united against injustice. Darnell felt a rush of adrenaline as he took in the scene. "Thank you, everyone, for your support," he said, raising his hands to quiet the crowd. "Today is just the beginning. We need to continue this conversation, not just here, but in our homes, schools, and communities. This is about more than my mother. It's about creating a safe environment for everyone." As he spoke, Darnell noticed a few familiar faces in the crowd, friends and colleagues who had supported him in his fight against injustice. Among them was his mentor, Agent Morales, a veteran in the FBI who had dedicated his life to advocating for equality and justice. Darnell's heart swelled with gratitude. He knew he could count on Morales to help navigate the upcoming challenges. Ms. Walker looked at her son, pride swelling in her heart. "You're doing so much more than I ever could have imagined," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "You're making a difference, Darnell." He smiled at her, though the weight of the moment still loomed large. "We're making a difference together, Mom, and I won't stop until this isn't just a moment but a movement." Darnell turned back to the crowd, his voice rising with passion. "We need to share our stories and listen to each other. Each experience matters. If you've been affected by racial profiling or discrimination, I urge you to speak up. Together, we can amplify our voices." As he spoke, a woman stepped forward, her expression fierce. "I want to share my story," she called out, and the crowd quieted, turning their attention to her. She took a deep breath, her voice steady. "Last year, I was walking home from work late at night when a police officer stopped me. I had done nothing wrong, but he accused me of looking suspicious. He demanded my ID and made me feel like a criminal in my own neighborhood. I've lived here my whole life, but that night, I felt so unsafe." The crowd murmured in empathy, recognizing the pain in her words. Darnell nodded, encouraging her to continue. "This isn't just an isolated incident," she said, her voice growing stronger. "It happens to so many of us, and we can't stay silent any longer." Another voice joined in. "I faced similar treatment at my job. I was overlooked for promotions, and when I asked why, I was told I didn't fit the company culture. What does that even mean? It's code for something much worse." More stories followed, each one a testament to the pervasive nature of discrimination. Darnell stood back, letting the voices of his community rise and resonate. He felt a swell of hope as people shared their experiences, transforming their pain into power. Ms. Walker watched in awe as the crowd united, feeling a sense of healing in the air. Each voice added to the collective strength, creating a tapestry of shared experiences that highlighted the need for change. She could see how cathartic this was for so many, the act of speaking up serving as a release. "Together, we can educate those who have perpetuated these stereotypes," Darnell said, stepping back into the conversation. "But we also need to hold those in power accountable. This isn't just about personal experiences. It's about changing the systems that allow these injustices to happen." As the crowd erupted into cheers, Ms. Walker felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. This moment of unity gave her hope for the future, a future where people would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by their character. Darnell glanced at the officers, who stood off to the side, their faces pale and uncertain. The power dynamics had shifted. They were no longer in control of the narrative. The community was taking ownership of their stories, and it was clear that change was on the horizon. "We must keep this momentum going," Darnell urged, looking out at the crowd. "Let's continue to gather, to share our experiences, and to educate each other. Together, we can create a safer, more inclusive community for everyone." The crowd erupted into applause once again, their energy palpable. Ms. Walker felt a sense of pride swell in her heart, knowing that her son was not only standing up for her, but also leading a charge for justice and equality. As the gathering continued, Darnell began to discuss plans for future meetings, encouraging everyone to invite friends and family to join the cause. He envisioned a series of events aimed at fostering dialogue, educating the community about racial biases, and advocating for policy changes that would create a more equitable environment. As the gathering began to wind down, Darnell felt a sense of accomplishment mingling with the lingering tension of the morning. The conversations that had sparked throughout the day were invaluable, and the commitment of the community to stand against injustice was invigorating. He glanced over at his mother, who was surrounded by a group of supportive friends, their voices warm and encouraging. "Evelyn, you were amazing today," a neighbor exclaimed, giving her a gentle hug. "Your courage is inspiring." "Thank you, dear," Ms. Walker replied, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without my son by my side." As Darnell made his way through the crowd, he overheard snippets of conversations, each one echoing the need for change. People were sharing ideas, discussing ways to advocate for their community, and vowing to hold local authorities accountable. It was a powerful moment of solidarity. Just as he was about to join his mother, Darnell noticed a familiar face in the crowd, Agent Morales, his mentor, and a key figure in the FBI's Civil Rights Division. Morales was tall and commanding, his presence radiating authority and experience. He was someone Darnell admired deeply, having learned so much from him over the years. "Agent Morales," Darnell called, making his way toward him. "I'm glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it for the world, Darnell," Morales replied, his voice deep and reassuring. He shook Darnell's hand firmly, a gesture of support and camaraderie. "I heard about what happened to your mother. I'm proud of you for standing up for her. We need more people like you in this fight." "Thank you," Darnell said, a sense of pride washing over him. It was a community effort today. Everyone came together to share their stories. Morales nodded, looking out at the gathering. "That's what it's all about, building a coalition, raising awareness, and driving change. But we have to keep the momentum going. The spotlight is on your mother's experience now, and we can't let it fade into the background." Darnell agreed, the weight of responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. "I want to organize more meetings, discussions, something to educate the community and keep this issue alive," he said. "We need to create a platform where people feel safe sharing their experiences." "That's a great idea," Morales said, his eyes sparkling with approval. "I can help you connect with resources, maybe even arrange for some guest speakers who specialize in community advocacy and racial justice. It's important that we take this opportunity to educate and empower." Darnell felt a renewed sense of determination as he listened to Morales. "I'd really appreciate that," he replied. "I want to make sure this doesn't become just a moment. I want it to lead to real change." "Absolutely," Morales said, placing a hand on Darnell's shoulder. "And remember, you're not alone in this fight. We're all in this together." As they spoke, Ms. Walker approached, her eyes filled with warmth as she saw the two men engaged in conversation. "Darnell, Agent Morales, I'm so glad you're here," she said, her voice brightening the moment. "Evelyn, you were phenomenal today," Morales complimented, a genuine smile on his face. "Your courage is commendable, and it's inspiring to see the community rally around you." "Thank you, but it was a team effort," Ms. Walker replied humbly. "I just wanted to share my story and encourage others to do the same." "That's the spirit," Morales said, nodding. "This community is lucky to have you both. We need more advocates like you who are willing to speak out and create change." As the three of them stood together, Darnell couldn't help but feel grateful for the support system he had. His mother was resilient, and now she was a source of strength for others, inspiring them to find their own voices. Morales was an ally in the fight for justice, someone with experience who could guide them through the challenges ahead. "Let's keep this conversation going," Darnell said, feeling a surge of enthusiasm. "We can brainstorm ideas for upcoming meetings and events, and make sure we're utilizing every opportunity to educate and empower our community." Ms. Walker nodded, her eyes gleaming with determination. "I want to be involved too," she said firmly. "I may be older, but I still have a voice, and I want to use it." "You absolutely should," Morales replied, his tone supportive. "Your voice carries weight, Evelyn, and people need to hear what you have to say." The three of them began to formulate a plan, discussing potential topics for future gatherings, ways to engage the community, and how to leverage social media to spread awareness. The excitement in the air was palpable as they exchanged ideas, each one more innovative than the last. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the park, Darnell felt a renewed sense of hope. Today had been a turning point, not just for his mother, but for the entire community. They were united in their desire for change, ready to stand up against injustice and discrimination. As the evening drew near and the last rays of sunlight began to fade, the atmosphere in the park shifted from one of activism to celebration. People started to gather for a potluck dinner organized by community members, a gesture of unity and togetherness that emphasized their commitment to each other and the cause they had rallied around. Darnell, Ms. Walker and Agent Morales made their way to the food tables, where a delightful array of dishes showcased the diversity of the community. The scents of fried chicken, collard greens, pasta salad, and various desserts filled the air, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. Laughter and chatter resonated around them as families and friends shared stories, strengthened bonds, and enjoyed a well-deserved meal. "Look at this spread," Darnell exclaimed, his eyes lighting up at the sight of a homemade peach cobbler. "I think I've found my favorite dish of the evening." Ms. Walker chuckled, the warmth of the gathering washing over her. "I'm just happy to see everyone coming together," she said, her voice full of gratitude. "It warms my heart to know that this community is here to support each other." As they filled their plates, Darnell scanned the crowd, noticing the familiar faces of neighbors and friends. They were laughing, hugging, and sharing in the camaraderie that was so vital to healing and connection. The earlier tension had been replaced by a sense of hope and belonging, and Darnell felt a surge of pride for being part of this community. After they found a table to sit at, Darnell took a moment to observe his mother. Ms. Walker was animatedly chatting with a group of women who had gathered nearby, her laughter ringing out like music. It was a stark contrast to the fear she had faced just days ago, and Darnell couldn't help but smile. Seeing her happy was a gift he would cherish. As the night wore on, the mood shifted from the initial seriousness of their discussions to one of celebration and resilience. A local musician began to play, filling the air with soulful melodies that inspired people to dance. Ms. Walker, ever the social butterfly, rose from her seat and joined in, her body moving with joy as she twirled and swayed to the music. Darnell couldn't help but laugh, watching his mother revel in the moment, her spirit shining bright. "You go, Mom," he cheered, clapping along with the rhythm. The sight of her dancing freely was a reminder of the strength that had always been within her, even amidst the challenges she faced. As the evening progressed, Darnell took a moment to speak with some of the attendees, gathering their thoughts on the events that had transpired. "How are you feeling after everything?" he asked a few neighbors who had shared their own experiences during the gathering. One woman, a longtime resident of the neighborhood, nodded solemnly. "I feel hopeful," she said, her eyes glistening with emotion. "It's so important that we're having these conversations. Too often we keep our struggles into ourselves, but today has shown me that we can come together and support one another." Darnell smiled, appreciating the sense of camaraderie that had developed. "That's exactly what we need," he agreed. "More conversations, more understanding. Together we can change the narrative." As the night deepened, Darnell and his mother found themselves surrounded by new friends and allies. They shared stories, laughter, and plans for future gatherings that would continue to build on the momentum created that day. The bonds formed in that park were not just about shared struggles. They were about hope, resilience, and the shared desire for a brighter future. The event began to wind down, but the energy was still palpable. People exchanged phone numbers, promising to stay connected and engaged. Darnell took a moment to reflect on how far they had come and how much further they had to go. "Tonight was incredible," he said to Ms. Walker as they packed up their things. "I'm so proud of you for standing up today. You inspired so many people." Ms. Walker smiled, her heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you, Darnell. You gave me the strength to share my story, and now it feels like we're starting something bigger." As they headed back to the car, Darnell felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. They were no longer just fighting for Ms. Walker's dignity. They were fighting for the dignity of everyone who had faced injustice. That night, as they drove home, Darnell felt a warmth spreading through him, fueled by the sense of community that had blossomed around them. He glanced over at his mother, who was looking out the window, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Mom, I promise we're going to keep this going," he said firmly, determination in his voice. "We'll organize more events, we'll share our stories, and we'll make sure that everyone knows they matter." "I believe in you, Darnell," Ms. Walker replied softly, her voice filled with pride. "And I'll be right there beside you, every step of the way." With that promise echoing between them, they drove home, united in their mission to create a world where justice and understanding prevailed over ignorance and fear. The next few days were filled with a whirlwind of activity as Darnell and Ms. Walker began to put their plans into motion. Darnell reached out to local organizations and community leaders, rallying support for upcoming meetings aimed at fostering dialogue and education around racial profiling and injustice. The positive energy from the gathering had sparked a sense of urgency, and they both felt compelled to keep the momentum going. Ms. Walker, invigorated by the support she had received, took on an active role in planning the events. She reached out to friends, neighbors, and anyone who had been affected by similar experiences, encouraging them to share their stories and be part of the movement. Her phone rang off the hook with people eager to get involved, and it filled her heart with hope. One afternoon, while Ms. Walker was organizing materials for the next meeting, Darnell received a call from Agent Morales. "Darnell, I've been thinking about the incident and how we can amplify this movement," Morales said, his voice steady and confident. "I want to discuss a potential partnership with some local civil rights organizations. They have resources and connections that could be invaluable." "Absolutely," Darnell replied, feeling a surge of excitement. "The more people we have working with us, the better. We need to reach as many folks as we can. Let's set up a meeting," Morales suggested. "I'll arrange for representatives from those organizations to join us. This is a chance to not only address your mother's situation, but also to tackle the broader issues of systemic racism in our community." As they discussed logistics, Darnell felt a sense of purpose filling him. He was ready to take action, to turn the anger and pain from his mother's experience into a force for change. He hung up the phone with a renewed sense of determination, eager to share the news with his mother. "Mom, I just spoke with Agent Morales," Darnell said excitedly as he entered the living room, where Ms. Walker was going through pamphlets and materials for the upcoming meeting. "He wants to partner with local civil rights organizations to help us make a bigger impact." Ms. Walker looked up, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "That sounds incredible, Darnell. The more support we have, the more people we can reach. We need to raise awareness and educate our community about the real issues at hand." "Exactly," Darnell replied, feeling the energy of their shared mission. "This is an opportunity for us to not only hold the officers accountable, but to shine a light on the experiences of so many others who have faced similar injustices." They spent the afternoon working together, brainstorming ideas and outlining the agenda for their first official community meeting. Ms. Walker suggested inviting local speakers who had expertise in civil rights and social justice, while Darnell focused on creating a safe space for people to share their stories without fear of judgment. As the days passed, word began to spread about the upcoming meeting, and the response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life expressed their eagerness to participate, sharing their own experiences and perspectives. The sense of community continued to grow, creating a powerful network of individuals who were committed to making a difference. On the day of the meeting, Ms. Walker and Darnell arrived early to set up the room. They had chosen a local community center that was accessible and welcoming to everyone. The walls were adorned with colorful banners and posters, showcasing messages of unity, justice, and hope. As attendees began to trickle in, Ms. Walker felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She was about to step into a role that she had never envisioned for herself, but she knew how important it was to share her story and encourage others to do the same. Darnell noticed her apprehension and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're going to do great, Mom. Remember, your story matters, and it can inspire others to find their voices too." With a deep breath, Ms. Walker nodded, steeling herself for the evening ahead. She was ready to face the crowd, to advocate for justice, and to honor her experiences and those of others who had suffered in silence. As the meeting commenced, Darnell welcomed everyone with enthusiasm, thanking them for coming together to discuss such a crucial issue. "Tonight is about more than just one incident," he began, his voice steady and confident. "It's about building a community that stands together against injustice. It's about sharing our stories, learning from one another, and taking action." The room filled with nods and murmurs of agreement. Ms. Walker watched as Darnell took charge, his charisma and passion captivating the audience. She felt a swell of pride as he introduced the speakers, each one sharing insights into the realities of racial profiling, systemic racism, and the importance of community engagement. As the speakers took the stage, Ms. Walker listened intently. Each story resonated deeply, echoing her own experiences and those of countless others. There was a shared understanding in the room, a recognition of the pain and injustice that had persisted for far too long. Then, as the time came for attendees to share their own stories, Ms. Walker felt a surge of courage. She stood up, her heart racing, and walked to the front of the room. "If I may," she began, her voice trembling slightly but growing stronger with each word, "I want to share my story." The room fell silent as everyone turned to listen, their expressions filled with respect and empathy. Ms. Walker took a deep breath, remembering the fear she had felt just days before and how far she had come. As Ms. Walker stood before the crowd, She felt a wave of emotion wash over her. It was both terrifying and liberating to share her experience, and she could feel the weight of their collective attention. Taking a deep breath, she began to recount the events of that fateful morning. "I've been coming to this park for many years," she started, her voice steadying as she spoke. "It's always been a place of peace for me, a reminder of the long walks I used to take with my husband. But that day was different." She glanced at her son, who stood at the side, nodding encouragement. The warmth of his presence gave her strength. "I was sitting by the pond, enjoying the sun and watching the ducks swim. I didn't think anything of it. But then, two police officers approached me, and everything changed." The audience leaned in closer, their eyes fixed on her. She continued, detailing the confrontation. Their accusatory tones, the feeling of being scrutinized like a criminal for simply enjoying her surroundings. Ms. Walker described how her heart raced, how she struggled to understand why they assumed she didn't belong. "I felt so small," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I had done nothing wrong. All I wanted was to sit quietly and reflect on my life, to find comfort in the memories of my husband. But instead, I was treated like I was a threat." Gasps of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Ms. Walker could see their empathy, their anger, and their recognition of the injustice she had faced. She pressed on, explaining how Darnell arrived just in time to stand up for her. "Seeing my son come to my side filled me with a mixture of relief and pride," she continued. "He's always been my protector, but this time, he was not just protecting me. He was standing up against a system that has hurt so many. And that gave me the courage to share my story today." As Ms. Walker spoke, the room filled with emotion. Tears welled up in the eyes of many attendees, and Darnell felt a surge of admiration for his mother. She was transforming her pain into power, using her voice to advocate for change. This was the moment they had been fighting for, an opportunity to shed light on the realities of racial injustice and to inspire others to find their voices. "I want you all to know that this is not just my story. It is the story of many," Ms. Walker declared, her voice gaining strength. "There are so many individuals who have been treated unfairly, who have felt the sting of prejudice. And together, we can change that narrative. We can create a community where everyone feels safe and valued." The crowd erupted into applause, the sound resonating with hope and determination. Ms. Walker looked out at the faces in front of her, seeing both support and recognition in their expressions. In that moment, she felt a profound connection to each person in the room, united in a shared mission. Darnell stepped forward, his pride in his mother palpable. "Thank you, Mom, for your bravery," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You've shown us that sharing our stories is the first step toward change. We all have a role to play in this fight for justice." He turned to the audience, encouraging others to speak up. "Who else wants to share their experience? Who else has faced unfair treatment or prejudice? Your voice matters." One by one, people began to stand, sharing their stories of injustice, their experiences with racial profiling, and the pain of being judged based on the color of their skin. Each story added to the tapestry of shared experiences, weaving a narrative that highlighted the urgency of their cause. As the evening progressed, the conversations became more profound and impactful. People engaged in discussions about solutions, how to hold local authorities accountable, how to educate their families and friends about racial biases, and how to foster a more inclusive environment for future generations. Ms. Walker felt a sense of fulfillment wash over her as she listened to the voices around her. The healing power of community was evident, and she realized that by sharing their experiences, they were collectively transforming pain into action. As the meeting drew to a close, Darnell encouraged everyone to stay connected. "We're just getting started," he said, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "Let's keep this energy going. We'll have more meetings, workshops, and to ensure our voices are heard." The crowd erupted into applause once again, their enthusiasm evident as they exchanged contact information and vowed to stay engaged. Ms. Walker felt a deep sense of hope as she watched the community come together, united in their desire for change. That night, as they headed home, Ms. Walker felt lighter than she had in days. The burden of the earlier incident had begun to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. She had found her voice, and in doing so, she had inspired others to find theirs. Darnell glanced over at her, a smile spreading across his face. "You were incredible tonight, Mom," he said, pride evident in his voice. "You really made a difference." "I couldn't have done it without you, Darnell," she replied, her heart full. "You've always encouraged me to speak up, and now I see how important it truly is." As they drove into the evening, the park lights twinkling in the distance, Ms. Walker felt a newfound sense of hope for the future. She knew there would be challenges ahead, But with her son by her side and a community ready to fight for justice, she felt confident that they could make a difference. The following week, the energy and momentum from the community meeting lingered like a warm glow in Ms. Walker's heart. She and Darnell spent their days organizing further meetings and connecting with local activists and organizations dedicated to social justice. The community was eager to engage, and with each conversation, their mission became clearer. They were going to create lasting change. One evening, as Ms. Walker prepared dinner, she reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. She hummed softly to herself, the aroma of her famous gumbo filling the kitchen. Cooking had always been her way of finding peace, a practice she cherished since her youth. Darnell entered the kitchen, drawn in by the delicious smells. "That smells amazing, Mom. Is it gumbo?" he asked, a grin spreading across his face. "Of course! I figured we could use a comforting meal after a busy week," Ms. Walker replied, stirring the pot with care. "Plus, I invited a few people over to discuss our next steps." Darnell's eyes widened with excitement. "That's great! Who's coming?" "I spoke with Linda, the woman who organized the potluck last week, and she's bringing a couple of friends who have experience with community outreach," she explained. "I also invited some neighbors who expressed interest in getting involved." "Sounds like a solid group," Darnell said, feeling the familiar spark of hope ignite in his chest. "I can't wait to hear their ideas." As they enjoyed dinner together, Ms. Walker shared stories from her childhood, anecdotes filled with resilience and determination. Darnell listened intently, absorbing the lessons of strength his mother imparted. Her stories of growing up in a segregated community and witnessing the civil rights movement firsthand had shaped her perspective and inspired him in ways he could never fully articulate. After dinner, the doorbell rang, and Darnell jumped up to answer it. He opened the door to find Linda standing there, accompanied by two of her friends, an enthusiastic woman named Sarah and a thoughtful man named James. They greeted Darnell with friendly smiles, and he welcomed them inside. "Thanks for coming, everyone," Darnell said, gesturing for them to take a seat in the cozy living room. "I'm really excited to see what ideas we can come up with together." As they settled in, Ms. Walker joined them, her presence bringing a warm familiarity to the gathering. "It's wonderful to see so many dedicated people ready to make a difference," she said, her voice resonating with enthusiasm. Linda nodded, her expression earnest. "After last week, I couldn't stop thinking about how important it is to continue this conversation. We need to make our community aware of the issues at hand and encourage others to join us." Sarah chimed in, her eyes bright with passion. "I've been involved with a local advocacy group that focuses on education about racial equality. We have workshops and seminars that could be beneficial for our community. I'd love to collaborate with you all." "That sounds fantastic," Darnell said, feeling the excitement build in the room. "We could use their resources to plan events that educate our neighbors and open up discussions about racial profiling and injustice." James, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. "I think we also need to incorporate storytelling into our events. Sharing personal experiences can create empathy and understanding in the ways that statistics and facts can't." Ms. Walker nodded in agreement. "That's so true. When people hear our stories, it humanizes the issues and makes them relatable. It's easy to dismiss facts, but it's much harder to ignore someone's lived experience." The group brainstormed ideas late into the night, their energy and enthusiasm fueling their discussions. They planned for community forums, where residents could share their experiences, as well as educational workshops focusing on the history of civil rights and the ongoing fight for equality. As the evening progressed, Ms. Walker felt a sense of belonging that had been missing in recent years. She realized that she was no longer just an observer. She was an active participant in a movement that sought to bring about real change. Later that night, as the guests departed, Ms. Walker and Darnell sat together, the weight of the day lifting from their shoulders. "This feels different, doesn't it?" Darnell said, looking at his mother with a mixture of pride and hope. "It does," she replied, her eyes sparkling. "I feel like we're finally starting to make a real impact, and I'm so grateful that we're doing this together." "Me too, Mom," Darnell said, feeling a surge of warmth in his heart. "We're not just fighting for our community. We're fighting for a future where everyone feels safe and valued." As they cleaned up the remnants of dinner, Ms. Walker felt a sense of purpose that she hadn't felt in a long time. The events of the past week had reignited her passion for advocacy and change. She realized that she still had so much to give, and that her voice, paired with Darnell's, could create ripples of change in their community. The following days were a whirlwind of activity and excitement as the community meeting approached. Darnell and Ms. Walker were determined to create an event that would leave a lasting impact on everyone involved. They spent hours planning the agenda, reaching out to speakers, and promoting the event through social media and community boards. "Mom, I can't believe how many people have already signed up to attend," Darnell said one evening, scrolling through the responses on his phone. "It looks like this is going to be a big turnout." "I'm so proud of what we're doing," Ms. Walker replied, her heart swelling with excitement. "This community has so much potential. People are eager for change, and they want to be part of this movement." As the day of the event drew closer, the energy in the air was palpable. Ms. Walker busily prepared her notes, wanting to ensure that her story resonated with everyone. She knew that sharing her experience was just the beginning. It was crucial to encourage others to voice their stories and to empower them to advocate for change. On the day of the meeting, the community center buzzed with anticipation. As attendees began to arrive, Darnell and Ms. Walker greeted everyone with warmth, their excitement infectious. They had transformed the space into an inviting environment, complete with colorful banners, informational brochures, and a welcoming atmosphere that made everyone feel at home. When the event began, Darnell took the stage, standing tall and confident in front of the crowd. "Thank you all for being here today," he said, his voice resonating with energy. "We've come together not just to share our experiences, but to create a movement for change. This is a safe space for everyone to speak up, share their stories, and learn from one another." The audience responded with applause, their enthusiasm palpable. Ms. Walker watched her son with pride, knowing that he was a beacon of hope for so many. As Darnell introduced the first speaker, a local civil rights activist, she felt a surge of excitement. The speaker shared her own experiences with racial profiling and the impact it had on her life. Her story was raw and powerful, leaving the audience in awe. Each narrative that followed echoed the same themes of injustice, resilience, and the urgent need for change. As the evening progressed, it became clear that the stories being shared were not just isolated incidents. They represented a larger narrative that had persisted for far too long. Ms. Walker felt the room swell with emotion as individuals bravely took the microphone to share their experiences, their voices shaking but resolute. After a series of heartfelt testimonies, Darnell took the stage again, ready to guide the audience into the next phase of the evening. "Thank you all for your bravery in sharing your stories," he began, his voice steady. "It takes tremendous courage to speak up, and your words are powerful. Now let's talk about how we can take action together." He encouraged attendees to break into smaller groups for discussions, allowing everyone to voice their thoughts and brainstorm ideas for future initiatives. Ms. Walker joined one of the groups, eager to engage with others and share her vision for the community. As they discussed potential action plans, ideas flowed freely. Some suggested organizing regular community meetings, while others talked about partnering with local schools to educate young people about racial equality and the importance of standing up against injustice. Ms. Walker shared her thoughts on hosting workshops where people could learn about their rights and how to navigate encounters with law enforcement. "This isn't just about us," Ms. Walker said, her voice filled with passion. "It's about creating a legacy of understanding for future generations. We need to empower our youth to recognize the importance of justice and advocacy." The group nodded in agreement, energized by her words. They spent the next hour crafting a detailed plan for their upcoming events, outlining their goals and strategies for reaching the broader community. As the meeting drew to a close, Darnell stood before the crowd once more, his heart filled with pride for the unity and commitment displayed throughout the evening. "Tonight has shown us that we are not alone in this fight," he said, his voice resonating with determination. "Together, we will create a safer, more inclusive community for everyone. We will not be silenced, and we will not back down." The crowd erupted into applause, a thunderous affirmation of their shared commitment to justice. Ms. Walker felt a sense of fulfillment as she looked around the room, recognizing the faces of those who had stood up and shared their truths. They were all part of something greater now, a movement rooted in empathy, understanding, and the unwavering belief that change was possible. As the attendees began to disperse, many lingered to exchange contact information and discuss their ideas further. Ms. Walker felt a warmth in her heart, knowing that they had taken a significant step toward fostering a community that embraced diversity and fought against prejudice. That night, as they drove home, Darnell and Ms. Walker reflected on the incredible energy of the evening. "I can't believe how many people showed up," Darnell said, still buzzing with excitement. "This is just the beginning, Mom. We're going to make a real difference." "I believe that," Ms. Walker replied, her eyes shining with hope. "And I'm so grateful to have you by my side in this journey." As the sun rose the next day, Darnell felt a renewed sense of purpose. The meeting had sparked a fire within the community, and he was determined to keep that momentum going. He quickly reviewed his notes from the previous evening, reflecting on the ideas shared and the plans they had set in motion. After breakfast, he called Ms. Walker into the living room, eager to discuss their next steps. "Mom, we need to build on the energy from last night. Let's schedule the next meeting soon and keep the conversation alive," he said, pacing slightly with excitement. Ms. Walker nodded, a smile spreading across her face. "I agree, Darnell. We can't let this moment slip away. We should also consider inviting local leaders to join us, people who can help us advocate for policy changes at the city level." "That's a brilliant idea," Darnell replied, his mind racing with possibilities. "If we can get some city council members involved, we can push for real change in the way our community handles issues of racial profiling and injustice." With that goal in mind, they began to brainstorm a list of potential speakers and local leaders to invite. They discussed various community organizations that had experience in advocating for civil rights, reaching out to them to see if they would be willing to participate in the next meeting. "Let's also create a flyer to promote the next gathering," Ms. Walker suggested, her enthusiasm infectious. "We can distribute them at local businesses, churches, and schools. The more people we can reach, the better." Darnell was inspired by his mother's initiative. "I'll design it and share it on social media too," he said, eager to get the word out. "We need to make sure everyone knows they're welcome and encouraged to participate." This is a community effort. As they worked together on the flyer, Ms. Walker shared more of her ideas, drawing from her experiences and the feedback she had received during the last meeting. "We should emphasize that this isn't just about the challenges we face, but also about the solutions we can create together," she said passionately. "We need to highlight the positive changes we're fighting for." Darnell nodded, his admiration for his mother deepening. "You're right. It's important to focus on what we can achieve, not just the problems we face. That's what will inspire people to get involved." Once they finalized the flyer, Darnell began sharing it across social media platforms, tagging local organizations and encouraging others to spread the word. The response was overwhelming, with messages of support flooding in. Friends and allies rallied around their cause, ready to join in the fight for justice. As the days passed, the excitement surrounding their next meeting continued to build. Darnell and Ms. Walker received confirmation from several local leaders and activists who were eager to participate, adding credibility and depth to their initiative. On the day of the next meeting, the community center was buzzing with energy. Attendees arrived early, excited to engage in meaningful conversations about racial justice and community advocacy. The atmosphere was filled with anticipation, and as Darnell and Ms. Walker prepared for the event, they exchanged looks of pride and determination. As the meeting commenced, Darnell took the stage once more, greeted by the warm applause of the audience. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice ringing with enthusiasm. "Your presence shows that we are united in our desire for change, and together we can make a difference." He introduced the first speaker, a local council member who had been an advocate for social justice in the community for many years. As she took the stage, Darnell felt a surge of hope. Each speaker shared their insights, focusing not only on the issues at hand, but also on the actions the community could take to push for real change. The conversations that unfolded during the meeting were rich and varied. Attendees shared their thoughts on creating educational programs in local schools, hosting workshops on community engagement, and fostering open dialogue between law enforcement and the community. Ms. Walker listened intently, her heart swelling with pride. It was exhilarating to see her community come together, united in a shared vision for a more just and equitable future. As the evening progressed, the floor opened up for attendees to share their own experiences and ideas. The stories flowed freely, creating a powerful narrative that echoed throughout the room. Each voice was met with understanding and empathy, reinforcing the bonds within the community. One young woman stood up, her voice shaking slightly. "I want to share something that happened to me," she began. "I was stopped by a police officer while walking home from school. He accused me of stealing, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. It was humiliating and terrifying. I just want everyone to know that it's not just an isolated incident. It happens all the time." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling in. Ms. Walker's heart ached for the young woman, but she also felt a sense of solidarity. "Thank you for sharing your story," she said gently, stepping forward. "It takes immense courage to speak up, and your experience is valid. We're here to support you and to ensure that no one else has to go through what you faced." As the young woman sat down, the applause that followed was deafening. The crowd was more energized than ever, their commitment to advocacy palpable. They understood that by sharing their experiences, they were not only healing themselves, but also paving the way for others to find their voices. As the meeting continued, the atmosphere was electric, filled with a sense of unity and purpose. The audience's enthusiasm grew as more individuals stepped forward to share their stories. Each testimony added a layer of depth to the discussion, illuminating the various ways racial profiling and discrimination had impacted lives within the community. One man, his voice firm yet filled with emotion, spoke about the struggles he faced after being wrongfully accused of theft at his workplace. "I lost my job, my reputation, and the trust of my friends because of an unfounded accusation," he said, his eyes scanning the crowd. "All I wanted was to provide for my family, but that experience shattered my self-esteem." Ms. Walker felt her heart ache for him, knowing the pain of being judged unfairly. "Thank you for your bravery in sharing that," she said, her voice steady. "It's crucial that we recognize the real consequences of these actions. It's not just a moment of discomfort, it can change lives." The man nodded appreciatively, and the room erupted into applause. It was a powerful reminder that these experiences were not just stories, they were realities that had far-reaching effects on families and communities. As the discussions continued, Darnell felt a surge of hope. The conversations were evolving from individual experiences to collective action. People began to share ideas for community initiatives that could help educate others about racial bias and encourage understanding. "Why don't we organize a community day where people can come together for workshops and discussions?" one woman suggested. "We can invite local law enforcement to join in and participate in the dialogue. It would be a way to bridge the gap and foster trust." "I love that idea," Darnell responded enthusiastically. "Bringing everyone to the table is essential. We need to create an environment where people can express their concerns and ask questions without fear." Ms. Walker added, "We can also include activities for families and children to promote understanding at a young age. It's important to educate the next generation about empathy and respect." The crowd buzzed with excitement as more ideas flowed. They brainstormed about creating a community task force to address issues of racial profiling, advocating for policy changes, and developing partnerships with local organizations dedicated to social justice. As the meeting drew to a close, Darnell stood before the audience once again. "Thank you all for your participation tonight," he said, his voice resonating with gratitude. "Your stories matter, and your ideas are what will drive this movement forward. We will create a community that values every voice and ensures that no one feels alone in their struggles." Applause erupted, filling the room with a sense of shared determination. Ms. Walker felt a wave of pride as she watched her son command the space, inspiring those around him. This was more than a meeting, it was a turning point for their community. After the event, people lingered, exchanging contact information and discussing plans for their next steps. Ms. Walker and Darnell moved among the attendees, feeling the palpable energy that filled the air. Conversations erupted around them, filled with ideas and hopes for the future. "Tonight was amazing," Darnell said, turning to his mother with a smile. "I can't believe how many people are ready to take action." "I know, it's so encouraging," Ms. Walker replied, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "We have to keep this going. I can't wait to see what we can achieve together." As they made their way toward the exit, a young girl approached them shyly, her mother standing nearby. "Excuse me," the girl said softly. "I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your story. It made me feel like I'm not alone." Ms. Walker knelt down to the girl's level, her heart warming. "You're never alone, sweetheart," she said gently. "We're all here for each other. Remember, your voice matters, and it's important to speak up." The girl smiled shyly, and her mother nodded appreciatively, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for your courage," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're inspiring so many people." As they walked out of the community center, Darnell felt the weight of the day's success settle in. "We're making a real difference, Mom," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I can feel it." Ms. Walker nodded in agreement, her heart swelling with hope for the future. They were building a movement rooted in empathy and understanding, one that would leave a lasting impact on their community. "I can't wait to see where this leads us," she said, glancing up at her son. "Together, we're unstoppable." As they stepped into the cool night air, Darnell took a deep breath, feeling invigorated. They were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united in their mission to create a safer, more equitable community for all. The days turned into weeks, and the movement that Darnell and Ms. Walker had ignited continued to grow. The community meetings became a regular occurrence, attracting an ever-increasing number of attendees. Darnell found himself busier than ever, juggling his job and his newfound role as a community leader. But each time he walked into the meeting room and saw familiar and new faces eager to engage, He felt invigorated. One evening, as they prepared for another meeting, Ms. Walker approached Darnell, her expression serious, yet determined. "We've made significant strides, but I think it's time we take our efforts to the next level," she said, her voice steady. "We need to reach out to local media to amplify our message." Darnell nodded, understanding the importance of spreading their story beyond the confines of the community center. "You're right, Mom. We can't just keep this within our circle. If we want real change, we need to make our voices heard on a larger scale." Ms. Walker smiled, proud of her son's dedication. "I can reach out to some local news outlets and share our story. We can highlight the community's efforts and invite them to cover our next meeting." "Great idea, and I can work on a press release," Darnell suggested, feeling the excitement build within him. "We need to clearly articulate our goals and the changes we're advocating for." Over the next few days, Ms. Walker and Darnell worked tirelessly, crafting a press release that outlined their mission. They highlighted the importance of community engagement, shared stories from the meetings, and emphasized their commitment to addressing racial profiling and injustice. When the day of the next community meeting arrived, the energy in the room was palpable. Attendees were eager to see the turnout of local media and to witness how their collective efforts would be showcased. Darnell felt a mix of nerves and excitement, knowing that they were about to step into a larger spotlight. As the meeting began, Ms. Walker stood before the crowd, her heart racing with anticipation. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Your presence shows that we are united in our desire for change, and together we can make a difference." Darnell stood by her side, ready to support her as she continued. "Tonight, we want to share not only our stories but also the progress we've made together. This community is powerful, and your voices deserve to be heard." As they delved into the discussions, attendees shared updates on their initiatives, brainstorming ideas for outreach and education. The atmosphere was electric, charged with enthusiasm and determination. Then, just as they were gearing up to discuss future plans, the door swung open, and a group of reporters and camera operators entered the room. Darnell's heart raced as he realized they had come to cover the meeting. "Wow, it looks like we've got an audience," he whispered to Ms. Walker, excitement coursing through him. Ms. Walker smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "Let's show them what we're all about." As the reporters set up their equipment, the attendees turned their attention to them. Darnell took a deep breath, ready to engage with the media. He understood the importance of articulating their mission clearly and passionately. One of the reporters approached Darnell, a microphone in hand. "Can you tell us a bit about what's been happening in this community?" she asked, her expression curious and open. "Absolutely," Darnell replied, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "We're here to raise awareness about the issues of racial profiling and injustice that affect so many in our community. Our aim is to foster dialogue, educate one another, and create a safe space where everyone feels heard and valued." As he spoke, the room buzzed with energy. Ms. Walker watched her son with pride, feeling the ripple effect of their efforts. She knew this was just the beginning, and with each passing moment, they were carving out a space for their community to thrive. After Darnell finished speaking, Ms. Walker stepped forward, eager to share her story with the world. "I want to emphasize that this is not just about me," she said, her voice strong and unwavering. "It's about all of us who have faced unfair treatment, who have felt the sting of prejudice. We must continue to stand together and advocate for change." As she spoke, the cameras flashed, capturing the raw emotion and authenticity of her words. Darnell felt a rush of adrenaline as he watched his mother take center stage, her bravery shining brightly. The reporters continued to engage with the attendees, asking questions and capturing the essence of the meeting. People shared their experiences, their hopes for the future, and their commitment to fostering a more inclusive community. As the meeting concluded, the atmosphere was filled with a sense of accomplishment. Darnell and Ms. Walker felt hopeful about the attention their efforts were receiving and the possibility of enacting real change. The next day, as the story aired on local news stations, they watched together, hearts pounding with anticipation. Seeing their community's voices highlighted filled them with pride, knowing they were making waves in the fight for justice. In the weeks following the news coverage, the momentum of their movement only intensified. Darnell and Ms. Walker found themselves at the forefront of a growing wave of community advocacy, and they were determined to keep pushing for change. The support they received from the local media had ignited conversations throughout the city, and people were eager to get involved. Darnell spent countless hours coordinating with local organizations, planning workshops, and engaging with community leaders. The conversations sparked by their initial meeting had spread like wildfire, And now more people than ever were committed to addressing the issues of racial injustice and community safety. One afternoon, Ms. Walker received a phone call from a representative at a regional civil rights organization. Ms. Walker, we've been following your story and the community response. We'd like to offer our support in your efforts to create positive change, the voice on the other end said. Ms. Walker could hardly believe what she was hearing. Thank you. We would love to collaborate, she replied, her heart racing with excitement. We're planning more community meetings and workshops, and any resources you can provide would be invaluable. As the weeks progressed, Darnell and Ms. Walker found themselves at the helm of a community movement that was beginning to take shape. They organized events that focused on education, awareness, and advocacy, inviting speakers who had dedicated their lives to fighting for civil rights. The workshops were met with enthusiastic participation, drawing people from all walks of life. Attendees engaged in discussions about the history of racial inequality, shared personal experiences, and learned about their rights. Ms. Walker often spoke at these events, sharing her story and encouraging others to find their voices. Your voice matters, she would tell the crowd, her passion resonating with everyone present. Each of us has the power to create change, to stand up against injustice, and to make our community a better place. As the community began to embrace the conversations, Darnell and Ms. Walker noticed a shift in the atmosphere. People were more open to discussing difficult topics, more willing to challenge their own biases, and more determined to work together toward a common goal. One day, during a particularly impactful workshop, a young man stood up and shared his experience of being racially profiled while driving through their neighborhood. It's exhausting, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. I shouldn't have to feel afraid just because of the color of my skin. It's time for us to do something about it. The crowd responded with a mixture of sympathy and encouragement, their applause echoing in the room. Darnell felt a surge of pride as he watched people share their truths and find solidarity in their struggles. As the movement gained traction, local leaders began to take notice. Darnell and Ms. Walker received invitations to speak at city council meetings, where they were given platforms to advocate for policy changes aimed at preventing racial profiling and ensuring accountability for law enforcement. Your voices are being heard, one council member told them during a meeting. We appreciate the work you're doing to bring these issues to light. It's time for our community to address these systemic problems head-on. As Darnell spoke to the council, he felt a rush of determination. We are committed to creating a safe and equitable environment for everyone in our community, he said passionately. We will not rest until our voices are not only heard, but respected. In the following months, their efforts began to yield tangible results. The City Council approved initiatives aimed at training law enforcement officers on racial sensitivity and community engagement. They implemented new policies designed to foster accountability and transparency within the police department. The news of these changes spread, and the community celebrated their collective victories. Darnell and Ms. Walker knew that this was just the beginning, and there was still much work to be done. They remained committed to their mission, fueled by the support and love of those around them. One sunny afternoon, as they sat together on the porch, Darnell turned to his mother, a sense of pride swelling in his heart. We did this, Mom. Together, we've created real change in our community. Ms. Walker smiled, her eyes glistening with tears of joy. We couldn't have done it without the support of everyone who stepped forward. Their courage is what brought us here. The two shared a moment of reflection, knowing that the fight for justice and equality was ongoing. They were determined to continue amplifying voices, sharing stories, and fostering understanding within their community. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over their neighborhood, Ms. Walker felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. They had turned pain into power, fear into courage, and silence into a movement that resonated throughout the community. Together, they would keep pushing for justice, not just for themselves, but for all those who had faced discrimination and injustice. Their journey had only just begun, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united in their mission for a brighter future.